Welcome to the Hud Grad Club. I'm Webb, and I'm the Alumni Engagement Career Consultant with the University of Huddersfield's Careers Employability Service. And, full disclosure, I'm also a University of Huddersfield graduate. So I've generally got pretty positive things to say about both the institution and any of our graduates. But don't take my word for it. In this podcast, we'll be meeting different members of the University of Huddersfield's global alumni community, finding out what makes them tick, about their experiences during their time at the university and their career journeys since completing their studies. Join us as we explore the inspiring, innovative and diverse range of individuals that make up the Hud Grad Club. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hud Grad Club, our podcast celebrating the University of Huddersfield alumni community. And Lindsay, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Well, thanks very much for joining us. So I guess just to kind of kick things off, if we've got anyone who's watching or listening to the podcast who's not come across you before, can you tell us just a little bit about what you studied at the university and what you're up to now?
Yeah, so I have a BA Honours Early Years degree from the University of Huddersfield. I have a Master's by Research, a PGCE, and I am going to just say I've just got my PhD as well.
Oh, wonderful. Fantastic. So yeah, lots of experiences through the university, and you're currently working at the university now as well, is that right?
Yeah, so I'm currently the course leader for the Childhood Studies programme in the School of Education and Professional Development and have been working at the university for the last 6 years.
Fantastic. So storied history of the university that I know we're going to go through as part of the podcast today. We start every episode, as always, with our greatest Hud story section. So this is very much about kind of your sort of memories, reflections from your time at the university. And a useful place, I guess, to always start with this is to find out a bit more about what brought you to the University of Huddersfield in the first place. So tell us a little bit more about that.
So I had a kind of a pivotal moment, and I suppose it is pivotal for everybody who goes through this, but I had a child. So I'd been working as a horse riding instructress for like 14, 15 years. And then I had my son, and it wasn't really practical to go back into that. And I'd always had this burning desire to be a primary school teacher from being really little. So I thought, right, this is the time. And having my child gave me that kind of urge to want to better myself and see what I could do. So I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I need to find out what I need to have. So I didn't have the right qualifications to get onto a teacher training degree or anything like that. So I actually went to the local FE college, did an NVQ2 in supporting teaching and learning. I think that's what it was. And I had my maths and English GCSEs, but I didn't have a science. I'd failed that at school. So I signed up with I want to say online, but it wasn't really online then. It was more email. But I signed up with a company and did my GCSE science at home, growing cress on the windowsill in the middle of December and lovely things like that. And then actually went and did my exam with the local secondary school children just at the secondary school down the road. So I kind of got myself ready. I went for an interview for a foundation degree in early years thinking, well, I'll go for the interview. I don't think I have enough to get on. I had also done a Workers' Education Authority level 3 qualification. And actually it was that tutor there that said, your work's really good, you ought to go do the degree. So I thought, go on, I'll go for the interview. And they snapped me up and they just said, what do you mean you don't have enough experience? You're working as a teaching assistant. You've got all this lovely horse riding teaching experience. So luckily they welcomed me on the course. And then I transferred from where I was and came to Huddersfield to finish my degree. So I did my final top-up year at the Barnsley campus with Huddersfield.
Wow, fantastic. You said quite a journey to sort of get to that point. And then obviously since then, you've had all those other qualifications you've kind of undertaken as well. So tell us a little bit about how kind of that progressed from sort of starting off with the foundation and then the undergraduate degree to kind of now sort of having recently finished the PhD.
Yeah.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you very much. It's still quite new, so it still feels a bit weird when you say it. So I was doing my foundation degree. Like I said, I was adamant I was going to be a primary school teacher, and I knew that having the degree in early years would enable me to get onto a PGCE. But my tutor, especially Judith Hunter, who was over at the Barnsley campus then, she was, you know, kind of saying things like, you know, you're really academic, Lindsay, you're really good at this. You obviously really enjoy studying. And I do. I am a little bit of a nerd, and I'm quite proud of that. I quite like it. And it was her that kind of said, have you ever thought about lecturing? You know, you've got the experience, you've got the professional knowledge. You know, you could put yourself, you know, kind of forward into that sort of career change rather than children. And the way that they sold that to me was, if you become a primary school teacher, you can influence those 30 children that are in your class every year. If you become a lecturer, you can potentially influence all those graduates, and all those graduates are going to go forward and work with children and families in lots of different jobs and roles. So actually you'll have a greater influence on children potentially by doing something like that. Judith really pushed me. She told me about the Masters by Research scholarship that the school had, and she really pushed me to go for it. And I fought really hard to get that. But I got the Vice Chancellor's Prize. I did really well in my undergraduate degree, got the scholarship to do the Masters by Research, and actually really enjoyed that. It's Liz Bennett, my supervisor, described it as doing a mini PhD in 1 year. And I was like, yay, that sounds amazing. Let's do that. It was quite isolating. You had to be really, really on it. You know,
because there's no talk components, right? It's all very few talk components.
Yeah, so it was kind of just doing like a big dissertation. But I really enjoyed doing that. So then I was working as a TA at the time, and I was loving my job, but you know, you had that urge that you wanted something a little bit more. So I had to make some options then, and it was whether I went and did a PhD, or whether I went and did a PGCE, which enables me then to go and teach. So I did put in for a PhD scholarship, and I got down to the last 5 and got interviewed, but I didn't get the PhD scholarship. So I thought, well, I've got 2 choices now. I either just pay to do the PhD and carry on working, which was fine, or I do the PGCE. So I decided I'd do the PGCE, which I absolutely loved. So I went on placement, actually back to the same college that I'd done my foundation degree at. Really, really loved it, really enjoyed it. Then I had another choice, because I had, do I go for the PhD now? Which I applied for and got on. The place where I was at placement offered me a full-time job. Do I take that? And then a 12-month contract came up at the university, covering sick leave. And I thought, well, that is my dream. My dream is to come and work at this university that's homegrown me, and I've got so much out of it. So it's like, well, what I'll probably have to do is go work in FE for a lot of years, and then eventually I'll get a job at Huddersfield. So I came for the interview for the 1-year contract, and I still sit here and think, I don't know how I got that job, but I did. I got the job. And I was already signed up to the PhD, but then obviously I completed my PhD as part of my job, my role. So yeah, I feel really, really, really lucky to have been able to have that journey and to have been able to work in the school for the last 6 years.
Wow, that is great. What a serious Hud story there. That kind of encompasses a real kind of journey sort of through the university. And I mean, great to kind of hear about some of your reflections there. It's a really good time, I think, I guess, for us to sort of talk a little bit more about that kind of career journey aspect that you've mentioned. So, you know, particularly, I guess, sort of the roles since you kind of finished the course and since you got that 12-month contract and, you know, leading to where you are now. But I think also to kind of come back, I guess, to what you were saying around being a mature student and how I suppose that sort of influenced that career journey. Because as you said earlier, it's maybe a slightly different kind of starting point and a different perspective than some kind of students and graduates will have. So I guess to start with, you know, tell us a bit more, how did it sort of feel going through that process as, you know, as you said, as someone who'd had kind of a career before, had been doing a bunch of other things, but maybe hadn't been so involved in the kind of higher education side? You know, how did that all sort of feel, taking that journey through all those different qualifications?
Yeah. So I was very keen, but also as a mature student, it was quite daunting as well. I think I made some real big decisions before I first entered the classroom again, specifically to do the degree. At school, I'd been really quiet. I'd not been somebody who put my hand up and things like that. And I had to make a conscious decision that actually going to university and doing a degree is a real privilege for me at that time. I was the first one in the family to go to university. It was something different. So I think mentally it was like, well, if I'm going to do this, I need to do it properly. I need to engage with it. So it really weird for me. I became the person who was quite vocal, who was asking lots of questions, who was really engaged in what I was doing, rather than the student I'd been at school who was sat at the back playing, please anyone don't look at me or ask me any questions. So I very quickly became this different person at university. So I always think, my time at university, and specifically my undergraduate degree, I think it changes who you are. It changed who I was. I became this completely different person. I felt like I had something to say. I felt like it was almost, validating me professionally, but just generally in life as well. So I had this identity as a mom, which was really important to me. I had this identity as a professional working in settings, but then I also had this other identity, this student, this developing sort of academic identity going on as well. But it was really nice when you've got a young child to be able to have something for you as well. And studying gave me that. So it gave me the time, because I had to have time away from the family to obviously be able to go and do your work and get your head in the right space to do your work and to do it well. But yeah, it did completely change who I was and my life.
And it's really interesting you say that about it changing you as a person, because I think you also sort of alluded to this earlier in terms of the type of work you wanted to go into. That initial focus on kind of primary school teaching, and then sort of pivoting towards more of the HE side because of that influence that you could have. I mean, tell us how that's progressed a little bit since kind of taking that initial 12-month contract. So, you're now, as you mentioned, kind of course leader for childhood studies. Have you found that that's kind of been what you've expected, I guess, when you decided to make that sort of pivot to HE?
So it's really weird, because when you've had that burning desire to do something for so long, and then you really are actually on the career progression to go and do it, and then all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're like, I don't want to do that anymore. I'm going to go do something else. So I think being on placement, and where I went on placement, they were absolutely brilliant. I was teaching, because I had my master's already, I could teach the level 6 students, which was just such an amazing opportunity. And I think having that experience enabled me to get the job here. So I started sort of teaching on the early years degree and the childhood studies degree. But the opportunities that I got here to, write new degrees and, change what you're doing and change your job role. And then when I took on the childhood studies course leadership, that's massive. The amount of responsibility that you've got, for making sure that the students are okay, and, that they're being the best students that they can be, which is something that's really important to me, because I really enjoyed my university journey. I enjoyed my undergraduate and all the other stuff that I've done after. So it's important to me that I draw on my own experiences, and specifically as being a mature student, or as a single mum for quite for a period of time. And I can draw on all those experiences, and I can use those to help me build relationships with students, which is really, really good, because a lot of what I'm doing is building relationships with students, because I want them to have this good experience.
And do you think that sort of path that you took potentially kind of helps as well with the nature, I guess, of kind of childhood studies students? So we had Emily Kappelman on a previous kind of podcast talking to us about obviously from her perspective now working in kind of partnerships and integration management, working more with kind of like the welfare to work sector, but talking about just how valuable childhood studies degree was for her in terms of things like thinking about how you communicate to different audiences, policy, all these type of things. And I know that sometimes there can be that sort of, for many degrees, that focus on, okay, this is the degree, there are a very specific set of careers I can go into, and maybe not being so sure about the others. So do you think your background kind of helps a bit in terms of the work you do on the course?
Yeah, I think definitely, because I've got different, you've got that range of life experience, haven't you? And childhood studies is not putting a student in a box, as Emily said. So we have so many students that can go in so many different directions. And I think, the key skills that you've got from having a little bit of life experience and being able to transfer those skills in different directions is really important for childhood studies, because yes, we're going to have quite a few students who go on and do a PGCE, but we'll have students on social work that go to nursing. We have some students that never want to go near a child ever again in their life, and that's fine too, and they'll go and get a graduate job somewhere else. But yeah, I think all your life experience, all my studying experience, because we have lots of students going on to MAs and things like that, it all kind of fits in really quite nicely with the role that I've got at the moment, because you, as a course leader, you've just got so many different hats on. But yeah, I mean, I always say it's a really tough job, this, but I absolutely love it, and I don't know what else I'd be doing now.
And as you said, that importance of building relationships is obviously such a key part of the role. And you've talked about a couple of people who've been particularly kind of influential, I guess, in your career journey so far. Are there any other sort of individuals on the podcast you might like to give a shout out to who've been, I guess, particular key people, I guess, in your career so far?
I think I'm just literally sat in my office now, and I'm thinking about the person who's in the office next to me. So we have Dr. Kate Lavender in the School of Education, and Kate was the academic skills tutor when I was doing my undergraduate degree. I mean, we have Mussarat here who's absolutely brilliant, and I always use my experience of Kate. So even though I was getting really good marks, I'd always go to Kate to get that reinforcement and to develop my skills early on. And she's one of the reasons I was doing really, really well. And actually, when I finished that degree, we stayed friends. We'd go out for lunch, we'd do whatever. And it's so weird that we're now sat in the offices together. So yeah, I mean, I always kind of use Kate as somebody who's inspired me and things like that. But I do think that I get a lot of inspiration from my students. So they push me to do things. They push you to do things anyway. But they are quite inspirational, and I think especially as you can see yourself developing your relationship with them over the 3 years that you're here, it's really important that I'm here for them. But I sometimes don't think they realise actually how much they influence me at the same time. So yeah, you do develop some really close relationships with some students. Some students I'm going like this because my door's there. Some students coming through that door.
We might have them on the podcast in a minute.
I know. Well, you've had a few of them. So you mentioned Emily, and you had Romana a few weeks back, didn't you?
Of course.
But yeah, I really like to develop relationships. And when I took on the role of course leader, we have pack groups. And so I had a year 1 pack group there. And I said, what I really want to do, I want to keep doing this role until I've seen a pack group from year 1 and I've seen them graduate. And last year my pack group graduated, and that was really special. And it's not uncommon for me to get a little bit wobbly and get a bit emotional with the students, because I just get so proud of them. It's really, really lovely. And what's going to be extra special for my third year this year is that when they graduate, I will graduate with them.
Wow.
And they're like, oh, wow, Lindsay, it's going to be so cool. We're all going to be graduating together.
Amazing. And as you say, brings it all full circle, doesn't it, in terms of what you're talking about developing as a person, changing as a person at university. You seeing that now, in your role as kind of a course leader, and seeing that for current students. So, I mean, amazing reflection, Lindsay. Thanks so much for taking time to share those. We finished the podcast, as always, with our underrated careers advice section. So this is very much about kind of any nuggets of wisdom or kind of information that you think has been particularly kind of valuable, I guess, during your career that you might want to share with anyone who's watching or listening to the podcast.
I think I've probably already touched on it. And I think one of the main things is, from my perspective, and actually from my perspective as a course leader, is to be open to change. Because when you come and do your degree, you're coming on your degree potentially for a particular reason. So I was coming on the degree to be a primary school teacher, but actually as you develop, and as I said, doing the degree changes who you are, I think you need to be open to how actually your career progression might change as well. So to be open to that and to welcome it, because I see it, because like the childhood studies degree is so broad, we have lots of people who come through and say, I'm going to be a primary school teacher. And most of them don't, become primary school teachers, or they at least think about something else as they're going through the degree. So I think opening yourself up to how it might change you as a person and how that might change what you can see yourself doing in the future. I think that's really important, because I'm not a primary school teacher. And I haven't lost anything by not doing that. I've just gained so much by just thinking, who am I right now and where do I want to be, and just following where it's taking you.
And it's a great note to end on, and links really nice, as you said, with our kind of previous podcast guests from that childhood studies background. In fact, from there, we've had Romana, obviously working now as a kind of student advisor for a students' union. We've got Emily working as a partnerships integration manager, yourself working in HE. So actually, no primary school teachers among them. Not that it's a negative thing, as you're saying, but just to show that breadth, So I think that's a brilliant note to end the podcast on. If we've had any students or graduates who've been listening or watching, maybe want to find out a little bit more about your work, or kind of potentially get in touch with you, where's the best place to find you, Lindsay?
I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's absolutely fine. I mean, to be honest, I work at the university, so people can just Google me and I'll come up, and my email and stuff will come up there. But yeah, happy for anyone to get in touch.
Fab. Well, to make that a little bit easier, we will flash your LinkedIn up on the edit. So if you're watching this, you'll see that at the bottom of the screen. And if you're listening, you'll see it in the podcast notes. But wow, thank you, Lindsay. Brilliant. We packed so much into that sort of episode. And thanks so much for taking the time to share your reflections about your career and becoming the latest member of the Hud Grad Club. And obviously, we wish you well with everything moving forward, and a bit of relaxation, hopefully, now that the PhD is finished.
Let's hope so. I'm hoping for a little bit more summertime this summer, let's put it that way.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Take care. All the best.
Thank you. Bye.
Enjoyed the podcast? Then go to the University of Huddersfield YouTube channel for all of our future episodes. Subscribe, like, and don't forget to hit the bell button for notifications. If you'd like to be involved in the Hud Grad Club podcast moving forward, please get in touch with us on alumni@hud.ac.uk.